All right, guys, this is the last lab of the semester. We're going to be talking about the urinary and the reproductive system lab. All right, so just follow along in your lab manual. Okay, you want to take note of where things are on a model. Again, if it has an asterisk at this point, you have to also know the function. Okay. All right, so the urinary system itself, start off with the urinary. Okay, it's a pretty simple system, right? Its function basically, right, is to filter blood and produce urine, okay, which is something you have to fill out on page 1 of your lab manual. All right, so in terms of its components, okay, we have two paired kidneys. You have a right kidney and you have a left kidney, right? And leading from the kidneys, you have these long, slender tubes here, right? These are known as the ureters, all right? And the ureters, right, are also paired, one on the right, one on the left, all right? And their job is to then, okay, transport the urine from the kidneys to this structure, this unpaired structure we call the urinary bladder, okay? So the urinary bladder stores the urine, and then from there, we have this tube called the urethra, which then transports the urine from the bladder to the outside of the body, okay? So you have two paired kidneys, a right kidney, a left kidney, a right ureter, a left ureter, a single urinary bladder, and a single urethra, okay? So the kidney's job is to filter blood and produce urine, the same function that I gave you for the entire urinary system, okay? The function of the ureters is to transport urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder, okay? The function of the urinary bladder is to store the urine, and then the function of the urethra is to transport urine from the bladder to the outside of the body, okay? So in terms of a pathway, okay, we can go from kidney to ureter to urinary bladder to urethra to the outside of the body. Kidney, okay, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, outside of the body, okay? Now, what would this look like on the lab exam? Okay, well, we have these models, okay? These are the abdominal models that we've seen, okay? So you can see that you have a right kidney and you have a left kidney, okay? And then from there, you can see these long, slender tubes. Well, these here, again, represent the ureters. So you have, again, a right and a left ureter. Okay, and down here, okay, this down here in gray, well, that's the urinary bladder, okay? Now, to see the urethra on the lab exam, we can also use these models that we see in lab. Okay, so here 21 on this model is the urinary bladder. You can actually see urine inside of there, okay? And then come off of it, number 22, well, then that is the urethra, okay? So this is actually a female model. Here's another female model, okay? You can see this structure here is the urinary bladder, okay? And then coming off of it, again, you can see the urethra right there, okay? All right, so in females, okay, it's about 1.5 inches in length, right? In terms of function, the only function of the urethra in females is a urinary system function. Again, that's to transport urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. Now, if we look at the male models, okay, here we can see the urinary bladder right there, and then we can see this passageway, okay, that leads to the outside of the body. Well, that's called the urethra, okay? Same thing over here. 28 would be the urinary bladder, and then here number 9, okay, which leads to the outside of the body, would be the urethra, okay? So in males, the urethra is a lot longer, okay? It's around 6 inches in length, all right? Now, in terms of function, it has the same function in terms of transports urine to the outside of the body, but also has another function because we're also going to talk about this when we do the reproductive system, okay? So in males, the urethra is also going to now transport semen, right, to the outside of the body. All right, so that's our pathway. We go from kidneys, right, to ureters, okay, to urinary bladder, and then urethra to the outside of the body. Now, we also talked about these already. We already did blood vessels, okay, but since it's in your lab manual on page 1, we're also talking about the blood vessels that serve your kidneys, okay, and again, here is your abdominal aorta in red, okay, and branching off of it to the right would be the right renal artery, which then goes to the right kidney, okay, branching off the same abdominal aorta in red would be the left renal artery, which then feeds the left kidney, okay? Now from there, we're going to then go back via the renal veins. Okay, so here in blue is the right renal vein, okay, which merges onto the inferior vena cava. Okay, and then coming off the left kidney, you guys can see in blue the left renal vein, which then merges onto the same inferior vena cava. Okay, so again, we talked about this already when we did the blood vessel lab, okay, but they did mention it again on page 1 of your lab manual. All right, so we're going to move on, guys, to the next page in your lab manual, page 2, okay, still continuing on with the urinary system, okay, and the kidneys, again, it has an asterisk. We know the function, again, is to filter blood and produce urine, okay. What you're going to notice is that the right kidney is slightly lower, okay, than the left kidney, okay, and the reason for that is because if you remember the structure of the liver, the right side of the liver is very expanded, okay, and the left side of the liver is tapered, right? So a consequence of that is that your right kidney is slightly inferior to that of your left kidney. All right, so we're going to take the kidney, we're going to do a frontal section through it, okay, and you can see that the outermost region of your kidney, this outer part here, has a lighter color, okay, and then this middle portion here of your kidney has more of a darker color, okay. Well, the layer here, this outer layer, okay, of your kidney, right, this is called the renal cortex out here, okay. And then this darker part, well, we call this the renal medulla, okay. Okay, and part of the renal medulla, you have this right here. This is called the renal sinus, right? And we'll talk about that in lecture. Now, within the renal, okay, medulla, okay, again, these dark structures here, okay, these pyramid-shaped structures, okay, these are called renal pyramids, right? So, again, the cortex is the outer part, the medulla is the more inner part. Now, the medulla is made up, again, of 8 to 18, okay, pyramid-shaped divisions here, all right? Again, these pyramid-shaped divisions we see in the medulla, we call these, again, renal pyramids, all right? So the base of the pyramid, okay, is out towards the cortex. The point, okay, what we call the papilla or the apex of the pyramid, okay, is pointing internally, pointing into the internal part of, right, the kidney. So here you can kind of see these pyramid-shaped structures here, okay, where the base, again, is out towards the cortex. The point, or what we call the papilla of the pyramid, okay, points inward, all right? Now, urine, guys, and we'll talk about this more in lecture, okay? Urine collects at the tip or the papilla of each one of these renal pyramids here, okay? So how do I get urine that's being produced at the tip of each pyramid, at the papilla of each pyramid? How do I get it into the ureter, okay? Well, you guys have these urine collecting tubes here, okay? So the center portion of kidney is actually this hollow space. It's a filled space, okay? And one of the things that you find in the space are these tubes that carry urine to the ureter, okay? At the very tip or the apex of each pyramid, we have what's called a minor calyx. For example, that would be a minor calyx, okay? And all these other ones. At the very tip of each pyramid is a minor calyx, okay? When two minor calyces merge, for example, this is a minor calyx and that's a minor calyx. When two minor calyces merge, you form a major calyx. Okay? For example, minor calyx, major calyx. Minor calyx, major calyx. Right? The major calyces then merge to form this funnel-shaped region that's going to lead to the ureter, and this funnel-shaped region right here, we call this the renal pelvis. Okay? And then we funnel the urine from the renal pelvis into the ureter. Right? So we have a little pathway now, right? Before we would just say kidney, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra outside the body. Okay, so we're adding to that pathway. Okay, we can say, okay, the tip of the pyramid, which is called, again, a papilla. Okay, so renal papilla, minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis, ureter, right? Urinary bladder, urethra outside the body. Okay, so again, that's the renal pelvis. That, again, is the ureter. So we have these kidney models in lab. Okay, and we can do frontal sections through them. So if I take the front part off of it, this is what it's going to look like. All right. So if you look here, okay, again, you can see the outer part right here, this layer out here. This here, again, is known as, okay, the renal cortex. Okay, this darker, deeper staining layer, okay, this is called the renal medulla. All right. Now, what can we ask you on this? Well, everything you see on page 2, right? So again, the whole thing is the kidney. Okay, this outer part is the renal cortex. Okay, this middle portion here, the kind of the darker staining region, is the renal medulla. All right. Within the renal medulla, you have these pyramid-shaped structures. Okay, well, that would be considered a renal pyramid. All right. And then we have the minor calyces. So the papilla or the apex of each pyramid feeds into these spaces here. Well, these are called minor calyces, which then feeds, for example, we'll just show you this one here. So minor calyx will feed into a major calyx. Okay. All the major calyces feed into this funnel-shaped region, this expanded part of the ureter. We call this the renal pelvis. And then from the renal pelvis, we then feed into the ureter. Okay, so that's a mistake there, so might as well correct it right now. Okay. All right. So continuing on with the bottom portion of page 2 of this lab manual. All right. Let's talk about the mechanism of urinary production. Okay, and all kind of the internal gross anatomy of your kidneys here. All right. So a little bit of a background. So we're going to focus on this small region. So we're going to focus on part of the cortex. We're also going to focus on part of the renal medulla, specifically one of these renal pyramids here. All right. Now, we're going to talk about what are called uriniferous tubules, okay, which are not in your lab manual. Okay, these are the main structural and functional unit of the kidney. All right, and they're composed of two things. Well, the basic structural and functional unit of the kidney is the nephron. All right, and the nephron consists of all these things that we're about to talk about. All right, on top of the nephron, you have what's called a collecting duct. All right, and two of these things, the nephron and the collecting duct, make up what's called the uriniferous tubule. Okay, so if you remember what we said here, guys. Urine is produced at the papilla or the tip of each pyramid. Okay, so how do I get urine from this region here to the tip of each one of these pyramids here? Well, we're going to use nephrons. We're going to use collecting ducts. All right, so let's start off with the nephron. The nephron, again, is the basic structural and functional unit of the kidney. Okay, its chief function is to what? Filter blood and produce urine. Okay, there is an asterisk next to nephron. Function: filters blood and produces urine. All right. So what do you notice about the nephron? Okay, well, part of the nephron in white is found strictly in the renal cortex. There's a part of the nephron found in the medulla. Okay, and there's another part again found in the cortex. Okay, so part of your nephron is in the cortex. Part of your nephron's in the medulla. Again, part of your nephron again is in the cortex. All right. Now the collecting duct, which we'll talk about later, okay, is in this orange color here. Okay. This here is found both in the cortex and the medulla. Okay, and what you can see is that it's going to carry urine where? To the tip of each one of these pyramids. Okay, it's going to carry urine to that minor calyx. All right, so let's start off with the nephron. All right, well, the first part is what we call renal corpuscle. Okay, and right here we can see in this nephron, here's the renal corpuscle. Okay, in this nephron here, there's the renal corpuscle there. All right, it's the first part of the nephron. Okay, and this is the part that's going to filter blood, right? So that you take the good stuff out of blood, you take bad stuff out of the blood. Okay, this is where blood filtration occurs. It occurs within the renal corpuscle. Okay, you're going to produce something called a renal filtrate in the renal corpuscle. Now we can take the renal corpuscle and divide it up into two things. Okay, a glomerulus, which is a tuft of fenestrated capillaries, and surrounding those fenestrated capillaries, you have what's called the Bowman's capsule, or your lab manual calls the glomerular capsule. All right. So the renal corpuscle has two parts: fenestrated capillaries, we call the glomerulus, and a capsule that surrounds it called the glomerular capsule. All right. So here is the model, okay, that we have in lab of a nephron. Okay. And the first thing you want to do is picture there's an imaginary line right around here. All right. So let's actually just draw on this right now. Okay, so you're going to picture that there's an imaginary line, okay, right around here. All right, so what's the significance of that imaginary line? Well, above that line, okay, so towards this direction, this is the renal cortex. Okay, in that direction, well, this is going to be the renal medulla. All right, so going back to this picture here, all right, here's the cortex, right? And then here is the medulla. You actually can see on these kidney models here, they actually drew some nephrons in white, where some of the white nephron is in the cortex, some of the white nephron is down in the medulla. All right. Okay, so here, found strictly in the cortex, this is our renal corpuscle. All right. And again, the renal corpuscle consists of two parts, okay? The glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. So inside the renal corpuscle, you can see in red here, well, this stuff in red, well, that's the glomerulus, okay? This is our tuft of fenestrated capillaries. All right. Now, surrounding that, you guys can see in yellow, well, surrounding in yellow, well, that there represents the glomerular capsule, okay? Again, it's also known as the Bowman's capsule. All right, so let's label that. Here, tuft of fenestrated capillaries, okay? If I say hint red, for example, I'm specifically talking about the glomerulus, okay? If I specifically point at the yellow thing that surrounds the glomerulus, well, then we call that glomerular capsule, right? If I point at both, let's say I point at both of them actually though, okay? Red and yellow. Well, the whole thing again is called the renal corpuscle, all right? Now, the glomerulus again are fenestrated capillaries, all right? So capillaries are fed by what? Well, they're fed by arterioles. Okay, so feeding the glomerulus, well, we call that the afferent arteriole, feeding, okay, our glomerulus. Now, what's kind of unique about these capillaries, okay, is that typically capillaries are drained by venules, right? Well, in this case, okay, we're not going to drain the glomerulus with a venule. We're actually going to drain it, right, with another arteriole. So here in red is what we call the efferent arteriole, right? So it's both fed and drained by arterioles. Okay, what do you notice about the color? Well, we came in red and we're coming out red. So what's not happening in these capillaries? Okay, we're not having respiratory gas exchange. That's not the job of the glomerulus. The job of the glomerulus is to filter blood. Okay, and again, that's the reason why we have fenestrated capillaries. Okay, we want to have a high rate of filtration, okay, within our kidneys. All right, so from the renal corpuscle, this is where we filter the blood. Okay, we got to take that filtrate and kind of think of that filtrate as having good stuff in it, and that filtrate also having some bad stuff in it. All right, so how do I get good stuff back into my blood, and how do I pee out all the bad stuff that I want to get rid of from your body? Well, the filtrate has good stuff and bad stuff. We're going to pass now through what are called renal tubules. Okay, and again, here's our imaginary line. We're in the cortex. Found strictly in the cortex, we find this initial portion of your nephron. Well, this is known as the proximal convoluted tubule right there. Okay? From the proximal convoluted tubule, we then go down here. Okay? Found strictly in the medulla, we call that the loop of Henle. Okay? So that's called the loop of Henle, found strictly in the medulla. From the loop of Henle, we go back into the cortex. Okay? Well, this part right here, well, this here is known as, okay, the distal convoluted tubule. And then from there, we feed into what? Well, we feed into what's found both in the cortex and the medulla. This is called the collecting duct. Okay, so why is it called the collecting duct? Because you can see here, it's going to collect urine not just from this nephron, it's going to collect urine from multiple nephrons. All right, so if we label now this, right? So again, this is our renal corpuscle. There's our glomerulus and our glomerular capsule, right? Again, if I say hint red and yellow, I'm talking about both. Well, that's the renal corpuscle. So we produce our blood filtrate here. From there, found strictly in the cortex, we see this right here, which is called the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, we go back down into the medulla. Well, this is called our loop of Henle. Okay, we go back into the cortex. This is called our distal convoluted tubule. Okay, which feeds into what? Well, it feeds into our collecting duct. Okay, now the collecting duct, right, will then feed into what's called a papillary duct, which is not in your lab manual. Okay, so what I want you to do is write in papillary duct. Okay, P-A-P-I-L-L-A-R-Y, duct. Okay, so the collecting duct merges into a papillary duct, and it's that papillary duct that then feeds, okay, the urine into the minor calyx. All right, so we have a pathway now. Okay, starting at the renal corpuscle, we can go renal corpuscle to the proximal convoluted tubule. to the loop of Henle, to the distal convoluted tubule, to the collecting duct, okay, which merges to form again papillary duct. You're going to want to write that in. Okay, to what? Well, to minor calyx, to major calyx, renal pelvis, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra outside the body. All right. Okay, so again, the glomerulus is a tuft of fenestrated capillaries. Again, what's different about it is that it's both fed and drained by arterioles. Okay, so there's our glomerulus. Feeding it is an afferent arteriole. Again, draining it is an efferent arteriole. Okay. Now, what happens to that efferent arteriole is that it now branches and it forms all these capillaries that surround your nephron, right? And we call that the peritubular capillary network in red, coming off of that efferent arteriole. Okay, so we have a little bit of pathway: afferent arteriole, glomerulus, which is the capillaries, efferent arteriole, peritubular capillary network. Okay, so why do we need blood vessels surrounding your nephron? Well, because remember, the filtrate has good stuff and it has bad stuff. Okay, the stuff that we don't want to reabsorb is simply going to get passed throughout all of the kidney. Okay, it's going to eventually get peed out of your body. Now, the stuff that we want to reabsorb, though, okay, well, if I want to like take glucose back in, I didn't mean to filter glucose out, right? Well, then we have the ability now to put that good stuff back into our blood. That's why we need to surround your nephron with blood vessels, with capillaries. All right, so let's look at a kidney slide. All right, so here I kind of zoomed in, okay, on this part right there. Okay, so I'm zooming in on that renal corpuscle. All right, and here's an actual slide of a kidney. All right, so you can actually see here, okay, this is your renal corpuscle right here. Okay, this is this. All right, now you actually can see surrounding that, okay, in pink, not in white, but pink here, this is your glomerular capsule. Okay, now inside of that, you guys can see your glomerulus or your glomeruli, which is plural here. Okay, so you have your tuft of fenestrated capillaries, and you also have your glomerular capsule. So collectively, the whole thing again is called the renal corpuscle. All right. Now, also, if you section through kidney, you're going to cut through the proximal convoluted tubule. You're going to cut through the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, and you actually can see here, you actually see it's a simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, and inside is the lumen. This is where the urine would be right here, inside this white space. Okay, so again, I don't know if that's the proximal convoluted tubule. I don't know if that's the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, so we're going to just generically call them and generally call them, we'll just call these renal tubules out here. Okay, so again, you also section through those. Well, that's what you're going to see here. Okay, so recapping again, in red, right, is the tuft of fenestrated capillaries. That's the glomerulus, glomeruli, plural. Okay, in yellow is the glomerular capsule. Well, in pink here, right, we can see is, okay, the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule. And then again, okay, again, these could be proximal, these could be distal convoluted tubules. We're just going to generically call them renal tubules on the slide. All right. So that's the urinary system, all right? So again, know the pathway of urine that it takes from a renal corpuscle all the way to the outside of the body, which would again be renal corpuscle, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct, papillary duct, you're going to write that one in, minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra outside of the body. Okay. All right, and also pathway through the blood vessels. That would be afferent arteriole. Okay. Glomerulus, efferent arteriole, and then the peritubular capillary network. Okay, know that front and know that back. Okay, lab part 2 of this is going to be the reproductive system lab. Okay, so same deal. Know the functions of things that again are marked with an asterisk. All right, so we're going to do the female reproductive system first. Okay, starting off, okay, with that mound of fatty tissue. Okay, right in front of the pubic symphysis. Okay, it has coarse pubic hairs on it. We call this the mons pubis. Okay, so here on the female reproductive system model. Okay, so here's where your pubic symphysis would be in 31. Okay, well that mound of fatty tissue right here, well we call this the mons pubis here. Okay. Now outside, again, this is the female genitalia of a female. This is not the vagina. Okay, this is actually what we call the vulva. Okay, that's a term we give to the external genitalia of a female. Okay, and what you see are two lip-like structures. This larger one outside, right? Prominent longinal cutaneous fold, so it's skin. Okay, it's going to have hair. Okay, extends from, okay, the mons pubis to the perineum, which is in the back, right? So these are called the labia majora. Labia refers to lip, right? So these are the major lips right here, these outer ones here. You also then have, okay, the labia minora, which we'll get to next, okay? But out here on these models, okay, this larger lip-like structure would be the labia majora, okay? And also on the other female reproductive system model here, you can see this is the labia majora. Now, there's also these inner lip-like structures, okay? These ones are called the labia minora, okay? So the labia minora, okay, extends, okay, from, you can see here, the clitoris, the clitoral hood, okay, more towards the back of that vaginal orifice, the opening into the vagina. All right, so on the models, we can see here, number 11 on this right here, okay, would be then the labia minora, okay, and then over here, this lip-like structure right here, this is called, again, the labia minora on the other model of the female pelvis, okay. All right, the clitoris, okay, it's a sexual organ, again, that will actually fill with blood when the woman is sexually excited, right? This is kind of analogous to the tip or the head of the penis in males, right? So the function of the clitoris, right, it's used for stimulation during intercourse, all right? So if we go to this model here, you see kind of this blue structure. Well, that's the clitoris on this model. And then over here, this pink structure right here, this is the clitoris on this model, okay? All right, the next one is the vagina, right? So again, the misconception again is that the outer genitalia of female is the vagina. Well, no, that's called the vulva. Okay, the vaginal is this narrow passageway right here, okay? So it's a very fibrous, a very muscular tubular tract, okay, leading from the uterus and the cervix to the outside of the body. So the function for this, what's the function of the vagina? Well, number one, okay, it's used during intercourse, okay, delivery of, okay, or the reception of semen from the penis during intercourse. Okay, the second function of this, well, it's the birth canal. This is where the baby will pass through, okay, during childbirth. Okay, and then it's also what? Well, it's also the passageway of menstrual blood flow. Okay, so number one, okay, it's used during intercourse. Okay, it receives the penis during intercourse. Number two, it's a passageway for, okay, the baby. It's a birth canal. Okay, it's also a passageway for menstrual blood flow. Okay, so we go to two models here. Okay, here you can see the vagina on this model, and then you can see the vagina here on this model here. Okay. All right, so the next part then is this pear-shaped structure. Okay, and this pear-shaped structure here, well, this is called the uterus, right? And the uterus, okay, its sole function is what? This is where the baby is housed, okay, and protected, okay, during, okay, pregnancy, okay, or for, okay, when the embryo, when the fetus, when the baby is developing, all right? So the function again of this, okay, is it houses and protects the developing baby. Okay, it's the womb, the W-O-M-B, right? Now it's lined, okay. Well, before I do that, okay, so here we can see here's the uterus on this model, and then here's the uterus here on this model here, okay. Now it is lined with different layers, okay. The inner lining, okay, of the uterus, okay, the layer that shed every, okay, menstrual cycle, all right. We call this, the inner lining is the endometrium. And then you have the thick muscular layer here, okay, and this thick muscular layer here is called the myometrium. So this is going to have smooth muscle. That's the layer responsible, for example, for uterine contractions during labor. Okay, and then the outer region here, which is not in your lab manual, and you don't have to write it in, don't worry about this one, but the outer layer is called the perimetrium. Okay. Now, connecting the vagina, down here's the vagina, connecting the vagina to the uterus is this neck-like portion right here, okay? And this neck-like portion of your uterus is called the cervix, okay? So let's find these things on a model, right? So here's the vagina. here's the opening into the uterus. Well, that's the cervix right there. Okay. Same thing here. Here's the vagina. Here's that opening to the uterus. Well, this is the cervix on that model. All right. Now the inner lining here in kind of a pink color. Okay. Well, that's the endometrium. All right. Here, number 5, right? The inner lining, okay, of the uterus is the endometrium. And then we have the thick muscular layer here, right here in pink, or this thick muscular layer here in kind of a pinkish red. Well, that's the myometrium. Again, that has smooth muscle responsible for uterine contractions. And again, the perimetrium is the outer part, which again, you don't have to know, okay? Now, here's another model, okay? Very similar to the figure that I showed you previously, all right? So here's the kind of more proximal portions of the vagina. Well, then here's the cervix right here, okay? And then here's the uterus, okay? Well, the cervix is part of the uterus. It's the neck of the uterus, okay? But this is your uterus here, okay? And then we see the inner lining, okay, in a dark purple would be the endometrium. And this thick muscular layer out here would be the myometrium, okay? All right, on the bottom here, you can see what it looks like if the female's pregnant, okay? So here you see an embryo attached to the uterine wall, and then here you see a little baby, little fetus, okay, within that uterus. Okay, what you notice is that when the female is pregnant, though, we do have to block the opening from the uterus to the vagina. We have a little, okay, collection of mucus here. It's called a mucus plug, okay, and this prevents things from, okay, entering the uterus when the woman is pregnant, okay? All right, so from the uterus, okay, this is a frontal view now, okay? We have then what are called the uterine tubes, okay? And the uterine tubes, a common name for uterine tubes, people know these as the fallopian tubes or the oviducts, right? Well, in your lab manual, we call these the uterine tubes. So there's a right uterine tube and there's a left uterine tube here, okay? And the uterine tubes, right, connect to these structures, one on the right, one on the left. We call these the ovaries, all right? So when an egg is released from an ovary, it enters the uterine tube, and there's cilia on the inner lining that help propel that oocyte, that egg, okay, into the uterus. Now, typically, conception occurs within the uterine tubes, okay? When the sperm fertilizes the eggs, it typically occurs here within these uterine tubes there. All right, so again, this is a sagittal section. So we're not seeing the right and left. We're only seeing, in this case, the right side, right? So here, number 8 is the uterus. We see number 2. Well, number 2 is the uterine tube. This is the fallopian tube here, okay? 3 is part of that, okay? Oh, there's a specific name for that. If we do the reproductive system in lecture, we'll talk about that, okay? But here's the uterine tube, okay, leading to number 1, which is going to be the ovary, okay? Here, you can still kind of see it right here, kind of a pink structure right here. Well, this is the uterine tube right there, okay? All right. Next one, okay, or again, we can see it on the right and left, okay? We can see the uterine tubes, okay, from the front here. All right, the ovaries, again, are the primary gonads found in females, okay? These are okay, equivalent to the testes in males. So this is where what? Well, this is where meiosis occurs in females. This is where we produce what are called haploid gametes, right? Specifically, this is where we produce the haploid eggs. Okay, this is where the oocytes are produced. All right, and that's the function. All right, so here we see number 1. Okay, there would be the oocyte, and over here, this structure right there. That's no oocyte. I'm sorry, the ovary, number 1, and then the ovary over here also on this other model. All right, and then from here we can see that we have both a right ovary and we also have a left ovary. Right, so we have a little bit of a pathway now, right? We can go from the ovary to the outside of the body. So we can go ovary to uterine tube to uterus to the cervix to the vagina to the outside of the body. Okay, so the ovary to uterine tube to uterus, cervix, vagina, outside of the body. Okay. Now, anchoring your 2 ovaries, okay, to the wall of your uterus, we see these in gray. Well, these here, okay, are called ovarian ligaments. Okay, so here are my ovaries. okay, you have an ovarian ligament anchoring your ovary to the wall of your uterus, okay. We can also see here, number 30 is an ovarian ligament, okay. Not so much here, but it's right there, okay. So I wouldn't really use this model to show you ovarian ligament. It's a lot easier seeing here, number 30, okay. Or I can use this model here and use it here and here. Well, here are the ovarian ligaments on this different model, okay. All right. Now, anchoring the uterus, okay, and also anchoring the uterus to the peritoneum, okay, which lines the side walls and the floor of the pelvis, we have what's called the broad ligament, okay. So anchoring the uterus to the sides, we see number 36 would be a broad ligament. Also 36 here is broad ligament right there, okay. And then over here we can see the broad ligament, okay. So number 36 and this broad ligament, okay. On this model here, we can see the broad ligament is here and also over there. All right, so be able to trace the path of an egg from an ovary to the X of the body. Again, we did that ovary, okay, which is right here, to uterine tube, to uterus, cervix, vagina, outside of the body. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on, guys, from the female reproductive system. We're going to be talking about now the male reproductive system. Okay, same deal. Be able to trace the path of a sperm cell from the testes to the outside of the body. All right. So starting here, okay, we're going to start at the male, okay, primary gonad, which is what we call a testes, plural, or testicle, singular. Right. So what's the function of the testes? Well, number one, it produces sperm. This is where meiosis occurs to produce haploid gametes called sperm in males. Okay, so we have the sperm. Okay, it also produces sex hormones. All right. Think about, all right, testosterone, for example. Now, from the testes, all right, and again, here on this model, there's the testicle there. There's a testicle there. Okay. From the testes, we're going to enter this comma-shaped organ behind the testes. This is known as the epididymis. Okay. And the function for the epididymis is that it stores and matures sperm. Stores and matures sperm. Okay. So if we go here, we can see that here's the epididymis on this model. And then here, number 2 is the epididymis, right, on this other model. Right, so stores and matures sperm. From the epididymis, we enter this duct right here. Well, this is called the vas deferens. Okay, so it goes up from the testes into the pelvis of the male. Okay, travels towards the back, right here. Okay, we call this the vas deferens here. Okay, and the function for the vas deferens is that it transports sperm. Okay, if you put semen, guys, that will be marked wrong on your lab exam. Transports sperm, heads and tails, right, from the epididymis to the ejaculatory duct, which is down here. We'll get to that. Okay, transports sperm from the epididymis to the ejaculatory duct, vas deferens. All right, so we go here. Here's our epididymis. We actually see it's actually covered with lots of blood vessels. Okay, so here's our vas deferens as we go from the epididymis to the vas deferens. Here then is a portion of the vas deferens not covered with blood vessels. Okay, it ends right there on this model, right? So from here to there is our vas deferens. And then from here you can see, okay, there are vas deferens right there. Okay, so 3 and 4. Right, 4 is just what we call the ampulla of the vas deferens. Okay, so from the vas deferens, where do we go? Well, we're going to go into what's called the ejaculatory duct. Okay, now merging also with the ejaculatory duct, we see this structure right here. This is called a seminal vesicle. All right, seminal vesicles produce 65 to 70% of the seminal fluid. Right. So if the vas deferens, which is carrying sperm, think of cells that have heads and tails, right? And then the seminal vesicles, which is now producing fluid, what do we call it, guys, mixing in our ejaculatory duct? Sperm cells from the vas deferens, seminal fluid from the seminal vesicles. Well, what do we call it now in our ejaculatory duct? Well, you call that semen now. Okay. So here, okay, you can see here's the seminal vesicle number 5. Okay. Here you can see the seminal vesicle right there. Okay. So here we actually see where they merge. Here's my vas deferens containing my sperm cells. Here is my seminal vesicle containing, okay, again, producing 65 to 70% of my seminal fluid. So we're going to merge into number 6 now. 6 is what we call the ejaculatory duct. Okay. So there's our ejaculatory duct. Okay. We see it here, number 6. Here, okay, what you can do to this model is you can take this front half of the model off. Okay, so if I take the front half of the model off, this is what it looks like. Okay, so here's my seminal vesicle right there. Okay, and then here is my ejaculatory duct on this model. Okay, so there and there are the ejaculatory ducts. All right. Now notice that the ejaculatory ducts are found in this structure right here. Well, this structure here is the prostate gland. Okay, and the prostate gland produces the remaining 30 to 35% of the seminal fluid. Okay, so again, the seminal vesicle produces 60 to 65% of seminal fluid. Okay, the prostate gland produces the remaining 30 to 35% of the seminal fluid. Okay, again, prostates are only present in men. Women do not have a prostate gland. All right, so here we look on this model. Okay, so here we see that big prostate gland right there. Okay, so I put the front half back on. There's our prostate gland. If I were to take the front half off, you actually can still see the prostate gland right here. Okay, so there's our prostate gland with the cover off, with the cover on. Okay, now over here, okay, you can see number 7. All right, so the ejaculatory duct runs within the prostate gland. Okay, so ejaculatory duct is 6. Well, the 777 is your prostate gland in red. Okay. Now, from the ejaculatory duct, okay, and here's your urinary bladder, right? Well, this here then must be the urethra, right? Which transports urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. Well, you can also see that your ejaculatory duct merges onto the urethra. Okay, so your urethra in males, not only is it a function, okay, in the urinary system, well, the function for the reproductive system is that it also transports semen from the ejaculatory duct to the outside of the body. Okay, so that's the urethra right there. Okay, so here we took the front cover off right there. So here you can see the urethra, okay, traveling through your prostate gland. And here we see the urethra then, okay, going to the outside of the body as it travels through the penis. Here, again, is urinary bladder 28. Number 9 here, okay, again, is the urethra. Transports semen from the ejaculatory duct to the outside of the body. Okay? Now, another gland right here is called the bulbourethral gland. It's also known as the Cowper's gland. Okay? Notice that it also merges onto the urethra. Okay? And what the Cowper's gland does, okay, or the bulbourethral gland, it produces a what? Okay? It produces a buffer that neutralizes acids within the urethra before ejaculation. Okay? So again, it produces a buffer that neutralizes acids within the urethra prior to ejaculation. So why would there be acids in the urethra in the first place? Well, because urine is acidic, right? So again, here's the urinary bladder, here's that urethra, right? So it transports urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. We also know that the ejaculatory duct merges with the urethra. So the urethra also what? Transports semen from the ejaculatory duct to the outside of the body. So if there's traces of urine present within the urethra, well, then that's going to be acidic. Is it possible then if sperm were to travel through here, could those acids kill the sperm in the semen? The answer is yes. Okay, so what the bulbourethral gland does, when the male is sexually excited, okay, the bulbourethral gland secretes a buffer, okay, that neutralizes those acids. Okay, so prior to intercourse, okay, if you ever notice, okay, a fluid leaking out of the penis, okay, and the male hasn't ejaculated yet, that's not semen. Okay, what that actually is, okay, is this buffer produced by the bulbourethral gland. Okay, all right, so we look here, right? Here is that bulbourethral gland number 8 right there. Okay, all right, and then the external genitalia of a male. Okay, so the main, okay, structure used during intercourse we see here is the penis. Okay, the penis, okay, averages anywhere between 6 and 8 inches in length. All right. So function for the penis, okay, this is used during intercourse, delivers semen to the vagina, okay, during intercourse. All right. So there's the penis. Now the tip of the penis, okay, this is going to be analogous to the clitoris in females. Well, the tip of the penis is called the glans, or the glans penis. All right. So here and here we call that the glans. Now notice that the testes, guys, they're not in the pelvic cavity of the male. They're actually hanging away from the body. Okay. And the reason for that, it has to do with temperature, right? Okay. So if you were to keep the testes inside of the pelvis of the male, those high temperatures would then kill the sperm cells. All right. So here we see the sac-like structure that houses the testes. Well, that sac-like structure, okay, typically covered with coarse pubic hairs, we call that the scrotum. Okay, so here, okay, we can see here's the scrotum there. There's also the scrotum right there. Okay. All right, so observe the microscope slide of the testes, sperm cells, and ovary. Locate each of the following structures listed in your lab manual. Again, learn functions of those listed with an asterisk. All right. Okay, so here, if we did a section through the testes, you're going to see these tubes. Okay, and these tubes that we see that are coiled over on each other, they're called seminiferous tubules. All right. And here is kind of a cross section through a seminiferous tubules. Okay, what you're going to notice is a thick stratified epithelium. All right. Well, this is going to contain, okay, sperm forming cells called spermatogenic cells. Okay, there's also be columnar cells whose job is to support those cells. So this is essentially where meiosis occurs within the testes of a males. You can think of prophase 1 here. Okay. Metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1, prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2. And then by the time you reach the lumen of these seminiferous tubules, now you start to see cells that look like sperm cells with a head and a flagella with a tail. Okay? So here is your seminiferous tubules. The function is what? Well, this produces sperm. Okay? Now, in between those, okay, for example, here's a seminiferous tubule, here's a seminiferous tubule. We see these cells that are in between these two seminiferous tubules. Well, these cells here are called interstitial cells. They're also known as Leydig cells. And the function for interstitial cells is to produce testosterone. Okay? So function again for the seminiferous tubules produces sperm. Function for the interstitial cells, aka Leydig cells, is to produce testosterone. All right? So here is a smear of semen. Okay, and here is a sperm cell. All right. So again, the function of the epididymis stores and matures sperm. If you say semen, that's wrong. Well, what's sperm? Head and tail. Function of vas deferens transports sperm from the epididymis to the ejaculatory duct. Well, what's sperm? Again, a head and a tail. All right. So be able to recognize these sperm cells, the head and the tail, on the lab exam. All right. Now in the ovary, all right, walnut-sized shaped organ. This is where meiosis occurs within a female to produce the eggs, to produce the oocytes. All right. And inside the ovary, you have these follicles here. Follicles at different stages of development. All right. So you have really small ones. We call those the primary follicles. Okay. You have secondary follicles. Right. You then have these large vesicles. Okay. Vesicular follicle. Okay. And eventually during ovulation, what happens? Well, the oocyte that's inside that follicle, that oocyte is then released, okay, and picked up, hopefully, by the uterine tubes, the fallopian tubes. So what's the function of an ovary? Well, this is where the female produces eggs, okay? So inside the ovary, again, you have follicles, okay? I want you to put an asterisk next to follicle. Well, these what? These house the developing oocyte, okay? They house the developing eggs. So here's a slide of a follicle. Okay, because we're zooming really in. We're only concentrating, for example, on something that looks like this. We're not looking at the whole ovary. We're just looking at that. Okay, so here you can see a large follicle. Okay. Function. Okay, houses the developing oocyte. All right. So the oocytes are contained inside the follicle. Right. So there's the oocyte. You want to put an asterisk next to that. Okay, oocyte. This is what? This is what, when fertilized, will become the baby. This is the female gamete right here, right? Now, surrounding the oocyte, you can see this purple thing right there. Okay, well, that purple thing is called the corona radiata. Okay, so the whole thing is the follicle. Inside that, we see the oocyte, and surrounding the oocyte is the corona radiata. So if I go to this picture here, here's your oocyte. Okay, here is your corona radiata right there. Okay. So turn the last page, you see a barcode. Well, that's the end, guys, of your lab manual. Okay, so congrats on that. Okay, this is our last lab. Again, next week, what do we have? Well, we have lab exam 3. Okay, so make sure you prep for that. If I was you, I just keep watching these videos. All right, one question I got asked about the blood vessel lab, like, well, there's models on this video that are not on your lab manual. Well, you still have to know them. So what does that mean? Well, you got to go back and keep viewing those blood vessel lectures, okay, with blood vessel labs. All right, guys, so have a good day. All right, see you on the next video. Bye.